We'll continue with Janine Teo and Reena Pauly's presentation with the title Leveraging AI to Support Self-Directed Learning of Disadvantaged Youth in Developing Countries. So, thank you. We can see the screen.
Yep. Awesome. So I just wanted to share the story of Sarah. So I met Sarah actually in one of our rollout sessions in the outskirts of Jakarta, and her family was moved from the slums in the center of the city to the outskirts. And Sarah told me that she dreams to become a doctor one day. However, chances are her dream will remain as a dream because at 17 years old, she already dropped out of school to support her family. Hi, everybody. I'm Janine, and I'm really so excited to be here and so excited to hear all the very interesting presentations just now. So for Sarah and the many others like her, there is no, they will not be able to access schools no matter how many schools we build or how many teachers we train because of economic, infrastructure, political, cultural reasons, etc. So the question initially that we asked ourselves was, how do we bring the schools to them? And in fact, she's not alone. These numbers are pre-COVID. So before COVID, there are already 258 million children and youth who do not go to school, and with 600 million, they are not learning. And these numbers actually should be really astonishing for us. So on top of that, what happened last year really threw us off, a curveball. COVID has actually impacted a lot of the students' population, and in fact, Unesco has estimated a third of the students who fall out of school due to COVID will not come back again. So let's take a moment to think about it. And which is why we asked ourselves, how do we teach? How do we bring the education to the hands of our beneficiaries? So an interesting phenomenon happened where mobile phones, particularly low-end smartphones, starts to magically make their way into the hands of our target users. And the question that we asked ourselves is, can we teach through this mobile device? So that's kind of how we've started our journey. So what we did was to start off with a group of beta users in Indonesia, mainly youth. We asked them what they wanted to learn and how they wanted to learn. And, it's not surprising, everybody wanted to learn through play. And through that, as we developed, and this is a few years ago already, we start to roll out to different countries and also widen our age group, not only from youth, but also to young adults. So currently we have two types of products. We have an educational game app, which is downloadable, and you can learn both offline and online, hence helping to bridge the digital divide. It's designed also to support lower end phones as well. And we have another product, which is interesting that the previous speaker also talked about chatbot. So we also have a chatbot product called Add, and which we are rolling out in Telegram. The main reason really is because some of our target users do not really have the digital literacy level to install a new app or navigate any newer interface apart from chat. So how do we actually do things? Well, I'm not sure if this is a knowledge that's commonly known, but globally, youth aged between 15 to 24, 1 out of 10 are unemployed. Not only unemployed, there's this term called needs, so they're not in employment, education, nor training. So we see that being a very big barrier for them. So through learning with us, they play as they learn, but one very important thing is to link the learning to a better life, either through employment or other opportunities. So the user journey with us, what they do is, and this project that we are doing in partnership with Reena, which she will share later, is through our game, Dawn of Civilisation, where it's a city building game where users come into play to build their cities. And in order for you to progress in your city, you need to select a subject and choose your mini games to learn. And so the mini games are really bite-sized lessons, and that's designed to teach many different skills. So I just wanted to also give you a background of how the game looks like. So yeah, the game is called Dawn of Civilization. Don't ask me why. This name is voted by our youth. And so in order to progress in your city and build a better city as compared to your friends, basically, you need to select different mini games to learn. And we have localized it today to, I think, about 16 languages. What you see on screen right here is in Indonesian, and we have also localized even in terms of like the clothing, where, you know, the characters will be wearing Indonesian batik, or in India where there is, they will be wearing, you know, the different, national outfits. So the last screen that you saw is the analytics, where we actually analyze how our users are learning based on different skills that they have been practicing, and so that we can track their progress as well. So with this, we are really excited to be applying whatever, to be applying the research for the benefit of our learners. So I'm just going to hand over to Reena. Oh, I think Reena, you can share your own screen, right? So I'm going to stop share right now.
Yes, so among other things, we at the Rationality Enhancement Group strive to develop practical tools for personal growth using the ideas, methods, and results from different fields such as psychology, human-computer interaction, computational cognitive science, or artificial intelligence. And so the connection we make with self-education already becomes apparent, because with Dawn of Civilization, they already developed such a tool. The connection actually came into being with Victoria, who's moderating the session. And we're currently pursuing and planning two projects. Firstly, the Brain Points project and an hierarchical goal setting project, which I will briefly both describe before then returning to the topic of the general benefits we see in these NGO scientific group cooperation. So the Brain Points project concerns the rewards the users of Dawn of Civilizations get for completing the mini games, which they can then invest into their cities. And it's motivated by the findings that educational games or gamified environments can often be gamed themselves, which means that users might exploit the reward structure they encounter. That might happen intentionally. That would be a user that really only cares about having the nicest city, and therefore tends to select the easiest, fastest game to collect the points without really being invested in progressing in their skills. It can also happen unintentionally, where people might tend to procrastinate with easier tasks to get that nice feeling of I've done something well, I've completed something, and shy away from challenging tasks. So maybe a student that already really good at vocabulary likes it more to return to vocabulary games than facing the challenge of starting with grammar games. And there's already been some interventions under the term of Brain Points intervention in other educational games that found that giving rewards that emphasize and reward effort rather than performance can improve the persistence of the user and help them to foster a growth mindset, which means the belief that intelligence and abilities are not set in stone, but can be developed if effort is put in and challenges are sought out, which in turn has been shown by a vast body of research to be very beneficial for learners, especially for disadvantaged ones. And the third building block in this project is a computational approach to designing reward structures developed by Leader and his colleagues that ensures that rewards cannot be gained or exploited by aligning the short-term rewards that are given for a game or a choice with the long-term benefit that choice is expected to have. So with this mechanism, even players that are out to only get the best immediate reward they get will still choose their activities in a way that benefits them the most in the long run. So we plan to test the hypotheses that these optimal brain points derived from this computational method can help users of Dawn of Civilization choose the mini games they play in an efficient fashion, meaning that they most likely progress their skill the most with the time they put in. And for that, we model Dawn of Civilization as a Markov decision process and use reinforcement learning algorithms to solve it in order to receive a method where when the user logs in, starts the app, we put in their current skill levels, and the method then returns which game should receive which reward in order to show them and encourage them to choose efficiently. And we then want to evaluate that by contrasting an experimental group of Dawn of Civilization users with a control group, which is receiving the current rewards, which are mostly based by performance, and see which games they play and which they don't. The second planned project is a hierarchical goal setting project, which you're all already very well informed about, thanks to Hernan. So there, the idea is that learners' motivation can be enhanced when they're working towards a goal. So they are being presented with a list of goals they can choose from. That could be take an online class that's taught in English. We know there's a lot of resources online for free, but a lot of them is in English. So you have to first reach that English level in order to be able to really take advantage of that. And those goals are matched to the English levels that are necessary to reach the goal. And then that goal is broken into milestones depending on the current English level of the user, and the user is presented with a plan depending on at which point in time they want to reach that goal. So in the form, okay, if you want to reach your goal in 6 months, then you have to play X numbers of games per day. Now to the general benefits we see in this cooperation. First of all, it has given us access to domain expert and knowledge we would have not had otherwise, concerning how to develop an educational app, what things to consider, English learning process or general learning processes, but also the specific challenges and needs of the communities that Janine talked about. So we were able to identify research questions we would never have been able to identify on our own. And as we progress with those, we also have the immense opportunity to reach the target populations of our interventions. So we can directly evaluate the interventions we plan with the people we plan them for, and don't have the situation that we evaluate our interventions with first-year psychology students and are then left wondering if those effects generalize to anyone else. And another really important aspect, I think, and I've also heard it come up several times in this conference, is that this cooperation allows it to be our results, allows our results to be directly applicable. So if, and at this point in time, that's still a bit big if, but if our interventions show to be beneficial to the users of Dawn of Civilization, then the application to the app is only the rollout from the experimental group to all users away, and self-education can directly benefit from it because it's already implemented for them and tested specifically for their product. So that's why we are very grateful to be able to work together with self-education, and we're also very grateful for any of your feedback, comments, and questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Janine and Reena, for the great presentation. And I want to thank once again all the speakers of this session for the very nice presentation, very insightful. Now we have time for questions. Peter, Juan, I will. Yes.
Thanks. So I'm fascinated by the last presentation. I remember, I think you said in the slides, the second slide, and it's in the Google Doc, that some 200 million have no access to school and 600 million have ineffective education. So presumably that means they're in schools, but somehow they're not learning or being taught. And in America, at least, there's a lot of criticism about what are people learning in schools and whether people who graduate from high schools really have the skills to go on to college. And I'm thinking the methods you're developing for children in developing countries, couldn't they be used also or tweaked to be used in developed countries, especially after COVID, where we now have much more experience with remote learning and so forth? And what are your thoughts on that?
So I guess, Reena, I will answer that question. So this 600 million students that are not learning, so part of them from the ones who don't go to school, there's still over 300 million that are going to school but not receiving effective education. And the measurement of that is functional literacy and numerical skills. So, and there is a wide range of reasons why being highly untrained teachers to unmotivated or, educators who don't show up, etc. Right? I do think that there is a potential of applying this to the United States or developed countries, just because we, not enough teaching talent is actually is a global challenge. And here what we are trying to solve really is how do we increase motivation, right? And I think the findings of this research and the tools that we will create would very much also be able to be applied to other contexts as well. But I guess what I should also be very cautious that different context is different. So different people are motivated by different things. So we'll find out.
Thank you.
Thank you for the question.
Do we have other questions? Looking at the Google document, but some of them have been already answered.
Maybe while waiting for other questions, I can also share, like in Singapore, where their education system is pretty robust. It's considered everybody have access to education. However, our solution still works here, but in a different context. So in developing countries, we work mainly with youth who might not have access to effective or education at all. But in Singapore, we have repurposed our context to younger learners who in Singapore is strange, but early childhood or pre-primary or kindergarten education is not mandatory. So underprivileged families don't send their children to this early childhood education centers. So hence, what happened is that many 7-year-olds go into grade 1 or primary 1, not having the ability to learn at grade 1 or primary 1, and hence start to fall behind. And so our solution has been applied in Singapore through a government-linked organization to help bridge that gap. So in different countries, I guess, the application is different. So in Singapore, it's really trying to bridge the gap, where in developing countries, it's really like education replacement, because there is a very functioning system in place.
Thanks for that clarification. Okay, I think I have now a question. This is for Mendy. I don't know if you're still here.
Yes, I am. Yes.
Okay. So the question said, I may have missed it, but how do you measure happiness and meaning? So
throughout 6 studies, we basically just asked them 2 questions. And for example, do you think this person's life is meaningful? Or do you think this person's life is happy, and we let them to rate. We have a Likert scale range from 1 to 7, with 1 being like completely disagree and 7 being completely agree. So the reason I think there might be some people thinking why there aren't using like happiness scale, subjective happiness scale, or like meaning and life scale. The reason why we didn't use that is because those scales measured like your current level of happiness and meaning in your life. But what we're focusing in our project is that we are interested in how people are judging these meaning and happiness. So that's the most efficient way for us to do that is just by asking them and let them to rate. So I hope this answered the question.
Mm-hmm. Yes, thanks. Is there a question regarding this, like a post question? I forgot the name of it. If not, I think I have another question for Christian. And is to which point do you think this motivation, like other people's influence in motivation and intrinsic motivation and so on, are mixed? So within a person, yeah.
Okay. I think what this question comes towards is, or hints at, is that idea of crowding out effect. So if we're thinking of, well, I'm adding to any intrinsic motivation, any extrinsic motivation that might crowd out intrinsic motivation. But I think what this questionnaire does, in a sense, is it measures intrinsic and extrinsic motivation, in a sense, between different people. So it's not within a person. So it's still, I still would say, the best form of motivation is autonomous motivation. But if another person might have not autonomous motivation, it might be good to have at least approaching motivation for extrinsic rewards rather than avoidance motivation for extrinsic rewards. I think that's how I would see it. I hope that answers the question.
Yes, yes. But I was also wondering, like within person, if this autonomous motivation, it's in like a rather binary, or is it possible to have within person mixed motivations towards a project, so that there's an intrinsic motivation, but at the same time the person cares about the other person's opinion, or does it too for the good of, that there's like a mix of motivations? Yeah, I mean, there could be a combination of all 4 reasons in that sense, at least from the Goldstein reasons framework. That's not exclusive. So if I'm high on pleasure, I could be high on altruism or low on altruism. They seem to correlate, but it's not, theoretically, they're not exclusive in that sense. Okay. Yeah. Thank you. Okay. So, Renan?
I have a sort of 2-part question for Christian. The first one is, I would love to hear just maybe a couple of, I know it's a big question, but maybe like, how did you come up with these like 4-dimensional framework? Like what a bit of what the process was, and why did you choose these 2 dimensions as an expansion for traditional sort of the intrinsic extrinsic continuum? Yeah, and then the second question is kind of related to what you just talked about, which is sort of a degree of overlap between the two, between the goal-striving frameworks and the intrinsic extrinsic continuum. And I was wondering, like, when you look at like the correlations between the 4 quadrants and like this intrinsic extrinsic continuum, is it possible at all to be intrinsically motivated, and that is correlated with avoidance motivation, or is it not? Do you not find it at all? Because in my mind, it would be like, I mean, it doesn't seem like an intuitive, like it wouldn't seem possible, like in my mind, to be.
Okay, so thanks for this question. Starting with the first one, I in a sense, I started off with the approach avoidance dimensions and arguing a lot about, well, the approach and avoidance dimension has been found to be really helpful and an important determinant of our happiness when it comes to the what of goal pursuit. So we have a lot of studies which say, well, give me your goal, and we let it rate if it's approach and avoidance, and the more people have approaching motivation, the higher their subjective well-being. But I find, well, no one really has, at least in its core, taken this approach avoidance concept and take it on to the reasons why people do that. And you can ask the same thing. Why do you strive for your goals? Are you running away from something or moving towards something? That's how it started. And then the internal, external dimension came in. I think to a degree it came in with saying, well, I think I don't want to create a model that stops with self-centered reasons, because then it cannot be all about myself in that sense. And I wanted to make that distinction, especially if you have such a vast amount of literature on altruism saying, if we are good to other people, that is good for our own happiness. And that needed to be in there somewhere. And also the necessity part of it, again, there's a lot of literature on materialism, and if we're striving too much for materialistic things, and then you could argue, well, people might find they need a second car or a third or fourth car. That's what they call necessity, but is it really necessity in that sense? So that's why that internal, external dimension came in, and I think that gives it a nice twist. Your other question, I'm not sure if I fully understood it, but I think there are correlations between, I mean, you can have approach motivation that is controlled or autonomous, and you can have avoidance motivation that is controlled and autonomous. So there are various different things, and I'm still getting sort of, I think, bottom of my heart, I'm still not really 100% clear how that distinction, because I'm sort of taking two strands of thinking and combining, or not combining them, but sort of mixing them slightly up in a way. What you do find is that the goals driving reason index and the self-concordant index normally correlate by 0.50 or something. And the intrinsic motivation measured in self-concordant theory and my pleasure and enjoyment scale, I mean, they're overlapping hugely in that sense. Yeah. But I think you can get pleasure out of extrinsic things, because others reward you and praise you. And I think that might be a different thing than just for the task itself. I think that is where those two dimensions differ a bit. And the other says, well, you could show that the differences, let alone in the way the items are phrased. It helps others, or the self-esteem one asks, if I strive for the goals because others would look down on me. Do you have the word others directly in the item? Whereas the autonomous dimension shies away from that, I would have thought, for valid reasons. Yeah. Does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely. Thanks so much.
Thanks.
Janine, yeah.
Actually, can I ask the question to Christian as well? Because I find the ghost driving, the framework really interesting. So I'm just wondering, is there a correlation somehow between extrinsic and intrinsic? So when you start to become more extreme, I mean, when your extrinsic motivators become stronger, does it somehow eventually help you ignite the intrinsic motivation? Is that a...
I think there's two ways of looking at it. One is obviously that the biggest point is the crowding out effect. If you have high intrinsic motivation, I think you can do a lot of damage by offering too much extrinsic rewards for that. But there's, I think, also the other variant that you say, well, people who haven't got any intrinsic motivation, how do we get them motivated? And I think then I'd rather have them being approach motivated, working towards something positive, although that might not be autonomous, rather than avoiding something negative. So that's where it comes in. And I think just the approach, the thing, I think why the goals driving reason index is a bit better predictor once in a while with happiness, is that it allows people to state, yes, I'm highly approaching because I have high autonomous motivation. And for others, they might say, well, I have a lot of fun working on this goal because it's approaching for me, and I'm loving it when I get rewards and praise and encouragement from others. That might not be autonomous, but it might not be the worst feeling on the planet. And that's so that it comes in, what I would say, between two people, not within the same person. Yeah, and I think the ultimate goal would be to make people autonomously motivated. But
yeah, that's absolutely. So go ahead, sorry.
Yeah, it's not always possible, I think, or if there is no intrinsic motivation there, then I think the approach motivation is the next best thing.
Yeah, because for us in our context, we definitely want people to be autonomously motivated. However, there are so many other factors, right? And that also even includes self-belief or you know, your personal perception of yourself, right? So hey, I mean, I will never be able to do that sort of job. That is something so unattainable to us, and so on. And then that also coupled with other complexity like living in poverty, right? So hence the scarcity mentality, you know, drive people to make shorter term decisions rather than longer term ones. So what we're trying to do is to get them to think about longer term, you know, goals. And we've been trying different things, and we find that short-term kind of rewards seems to work. However, to convert, to overcome that right into a long-term mentality while working with a demographic that has been living with scarcity for a long time is quite challenging. So that's why I'm just curious, like, how do we apply what you do in, you know, in our work? Would be something I'm very interested to.
I think the goals-driven reasons framework, I mean, the questions they start off with, what is your most important goal in life, or what is your most important goal at work? That normally shouldn't trigger a short-term goal, but rather a more long-term goal in that sense. So it's probably focusing a bit more on that one, I would have thought.
Well, the focus for our demographics rather short-term, I would say, like, do I have food today, right? So that's why we, you know, we have this challenge, and yeah, thank you.
Thanks a lot.
And we have Peter.
Yeah, so this is also for Christian, sort of a follow-up, I guess. You mentioned that the goals-driving reasons framework also correlated well with burnout. And I was wondering if you could say something about whether that, you know, versus self-concordance, is one a better predictor of burnout, and if so, why?
We've done it with one, thanks for this question. We've done it with one study, and we found exactly the same pattern in terms of if we enter self-concordance index and goals-driven index at the same time, goals-driven reason index remains the significant predictor and renders the self-concordance index as non-significant anymore. We haven't studied in any way, shape, or form why that could be the case. I think my only explanation to that would maybe be, again, is about, I'm working in a context where there's a lot of influence from others, maybe direct influence from others, and that has something to do. If I'm just looking at the goals-driven reason index, I always felt, well, and one finding we found is when we integrated or also asked, how hard are you working? What is your work intensity? And normally when work intensity goes up, life status or happiness goes down a bit. But what we found that the goals-driven reason index, if people strive for their goals for the right reason, that going down in happiness because of high work intensity is moderated, is buffered a bit. So that is one finding we had in terms of, well, if you work for the right reasons, you can work very hard and you keep your happiness up there, rather than if you have high work intensity and you're doing it for the wrong reasons, for lack of a better phrase here, then your happiness goes down a bit. And I think that is the finding we have additionally to burnout in that sense. Thanks a lot for that question.
Thank you. So we still have some time if somebody else wants to do a question, or if not, I have. Yeah, okay, I will ask my question. This is to Janine, and it's how, so I would normally think that people in Islam don't have a phone or access to a phone, but it seems to be changing. And my question is, like, how reachable, like, how do you think, how many years, or it's going to be actually possible to have like in the base of the pyramid that really kids can learn, use this system reliably, and that everybody can have access to this, or if you know?
So what I don't think I can predict because technology changes so quickly, but what I can tell you is this. Android phones prices have been dropping about approximately 20% year on year for the last couple of years. That's one data point. Another exciting data point is this alternative operating system called KaiOS. So KaiOS has now over 100 million users already, and they power their something between a smartphone and a feature phone, somewhere in the middle. So what this means is they don't have the touch screen, which is usually the costly part of the smartphones. So with that technology, our partner in India, Reliance Jio. So they are a key partner in India with 400 million, over 400 million phone subscribers. So, and their kind of a signature product is their Joe phone that costs $20 to $30 or so, exactly on KaiOS, and they are gaining a very immense, quick, very quick speed, right? And also thanks to them, the data cost in developing countries are also dropping, right? So to give you a sense, in India, for you to have a month of data, it is, I would say, about 5 euros or so. It's really, really cheap. And because of movements like this, right, I would say that it is going to be much more exponential than we've previously seen. And honestly, I'm really excited about it. So if we were to go at the same pace, right, we probably take a very long time. But I think with this different technology and movements, we should be there, in say 10 to 20 years time.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So I'm checking the chat if I have another question. If not, I think I can then ask my last question to Mehdi. And Mehdi, so I was a bit surprised that happiness was so high. Like normally I was expecting that people that are don't have a real meaning, like I was expecting them not to have so higher happiness, or to say, or so, and now you explain that this is just what is not as a real scale, like that they filled a formula or a scale that it's for that purpose. So I was wondering, what do you think it would happen? How would these graphics change if we would see an actual, if they would be using a scale on meaning and a scale on happiness, and not only how they judge it, if they would change a lot?
Yeah, that's a great question. So originally this project had 7 studies, but we took one down to put in the supplementary material, just to tell a very more coherent story. But the study that we took down is we actually used actual scale, and we just asked people, what do you think, currently in your life, what do you think, how much benefits to society have you provided, and how much benefits to yourself have you provided? For example, your work, to yourself, major promotion and those kind of stuff. And we correlate them with people's actual meaning in life, and we also use subjective happiness scale to measure people's current happiness level. And what we found is that both meaning and happiness, they are predicted by both benefits to society and benefits to self as of participants' current level. So participants' current level of benefits to society and benefits to self equally predicts participants' current level of meaning and happiness. However, we also had another question in which we asked participants, like, what's your most important future goals in your life? And the participant may answer, okay, I want to like help my neighborhood, or I want to buy a house, I want to get married, I want to have my own children, etc. And then we also let them to rate how much do you think this most important life goal related to benefits to society and benefits to self. And what we found is that only benefits to the self, the society predicts participants' happiness and meaning level. So which means that benefits to society, like how much you contribute to the society, or like your neighborhood, your community, people around you, that will predict your meaningfulness and your happiness in life. So overall, like this.
Okay. And these studies, okay, so you had a lot of studies already presenting them, like you had a list, so it's, I understand that you can add more of them in a sense that, so it's, if I understood, so you did use scales, and they predicted more meaning if when it's in a serving, more like into serving than into just trying to become happy oneself.
That is correct. The reason why we didn't put that into our main sequence of study is that because we're interested in how people view these, people's judgment about these, about meaning and happiness. And that study is kind of like how people perceive and how people's current level of happiness and meaning related to benefits to the self and benefits to society. So it is kind of like off the topic a little bit, so that's why we take it off. But we still include it in the supplemental material. So if anyone wants to see it, please, you can email me, and then I can send you the material if you need.
Yeah. Thank you very much. That was insightful for me. And so I think, does anybody else have a question? I have my last question for Reena. And so I think, so in your project, you are applying artificial intelligence and Markov models that are normally not applied into such a wide, like in real life situations with real users, but rather like in small environments. And my question is, what do you think is the biggest challenge to try to apply this research into real, like solving real life problems with so many users? And how are you approaching it?
So I think the big challenge is that the whole game gets rather complex, so you have a lot of different possibilities you have to account for, because the users can have very different skills or skill sets, and we're trying to solve that by approximating the solution for the process. So trying to capture all the different game elements and also skill measuring elements with the info we got from self-education, and putting also deriving user properties from their data. So we were able to get data on how many games they typically play in a row, how many days usually pass between those game sessions, how long they take for different games, and then can use those distributions in the model instead of having different models for each user.